I rewatched all of One Piece to find 25 moments that you probably forgot about. I'm talking about super niche clips that you would need to have a perfect memory to remember. However, I know a lot of you watching are diehard fans, so if you remember all 25, let me know in the comments. That way next time I can try harder to find better clips. Alright, enough yapping. Let's get to number 25. So number 25 is kind of a combination of two moments, and it starts at the beginning of Alabasta when we first meet Ace. The Straw Hats are on the Going Merry, and we see Ace on his little fire-powered ship, and he engages into a battle with the Baroque Works members. It's then we see him jump off of his boat and do a little backflip and simultaneously take out the Baroque Works ships. Now fast forward to Skypiea, we see Usopp actually try to copy this backflip that Ace did. And Noah was about to electrocute Usopp, so he runs forward and jumps through the air doing front flips slash back flips, and it looks pretty good until that happened. So yeah, number 25 was Usopp trying to copy Ace. Did you remember that? Okay, number 24, we have Luffy's tooth growing back in Whole Cake Island. You may remember Luffy missing a tooth at some point, and this didn't just like magically appear back into his mouth. He lost this tooth to his own crew member. Sanji kicked him in the face during the Whole Cake Island arc, betraying Luffy and knocking out his tooth. And for a good portion of the arc, this tooth is not there. However, when he's meeting with Captain Beji and getting cleaned up for that meeting, we see him take a drink out of a carton of milk, and magically that tooth ends up growing back. Just another random power and thing that Luffy can do, I guess. Moving on to 23, it's when Zoro had beef with crickets. This happened during the Jaya arc. While the Straw Hats were trying to learn more about Skypiea, we see Zoro in a fight with some crickets, and there's several piles of knocked out or dead crickets on the ground, and Zoro is clearly not happy with these crickets.
You think you can beat me, do ya?
Next up, we've got possibly the most disrespectful moment in One Piece, but maybe you forgot about it because it's in an arc with a bunch of other stuff that happens, but this is during the Colosseum part of the Dressrosa arc. In the midst of a battle going on, Bartolomeo decides to urinate on the battlefield. Mid-match, mid-fight, didn't matter, he had to get it out. YouTube doesn't allow real urine to be shown, so I'm not sure about animated urine. I'm just gonna blur it out to be careful, but if you really want to see Barto pee because maybe you forgot about it, here's the episode and timestamp, you freaks. Now before I move on, I will say if you are a subscriber to my channel, you will remember a lot of these because I have made YouTube shorts about a few of them in the past. So you have an advantage over everyone else, and if you aren't subscribed, just tap the button. It only takes a couple seconds. Anyways, number 21 leads us to Fishman Island where we have Sanji and Jinbei. We all know Sanji was not himself during the Fishman Island arc. I made an entire video about that a while ago, but nonetheless, I can't pretend it didn't happen, and I feel like a lot of people forced themselves to forget about this moment and probably just forgetting about Sanji's entire existence during the Fishman arc. There's a moment where Jinbei is apologizing to Nami because of what he did in his past with Arlong and everything else, because in a weird butterfly effect, Jinbei is the reason Arlong tortured Nami for so many years. And I'm not gonna say what Sanji said, but I'll play the clip.
Oh yeah? If you're so sorry, kill yourself.
Sanji.
Completely out of pocket for Sanji's character and just a random moment in the show. Number 20 is Long Ring Long Land, which I know most of you don't remember because you skipped the arc, but you diehard fans probably definitely remember what I'm about to say, and this is when Luffy was racist to Chopper. When the Straw Hats first arrived to the Long Ring Long Land island, they were fascinated by all these long and weird shaped animals when a super long moose deer-like creature walked by, and Luffy pointed at it and said, "Hey Chopper, look, there's your cousin." Maybe a little bit of a microaggression from Luffy, I don't know. Now at number 19, we have a moment with Frankie, and if you remember in the little like train arc from Water 7 to Enies Lobby, Frankie battles Nero, a CP9 member, on top of the sea train and reveals a new move that splits his legs in half. He calls this Frankie Centaur, because he does become a robotic centaur. Frankie has done many odd things, but this is definitely one of the weirdest for sure. However, I'd like to see him do it again. Next up at number 18, we have the Straw Hats trying to eat a sea cat. This was right after they left Little Garden and were on their way to Alabasta. A giant cat-like sea creature emerges out of the ocean, and Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro are all trying to take it out so they can have some food. You know it was serious because it's not often that Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are all sharing the same brain cell. Number 17, we have the moving mirrors in Thriller Bark. Now I'm sure you remember these because this wasn't really a super niche moment, but I wanted to include them because Thriller Bark was kind of a weird arc in general, and sometimes these are overlooked. The beginning of this arc gave me Scooby-Doo vibes when the Straw Hats were in the castle, because there were times where they'd walk by these things and then their eyes would move behind them That's something that happened in Scooby-Doo all the time. And then at some point they all pop out and start attacking everyone. You probably do remember that, but it seems like more of a fever dream than something that actually happened. Now number 16 leads us to the feast after the fight with Crocodile in Alabasta. Luffy is going crazy and eating everybody's food, and Usopp gets tired of it. So he decides to put some hot sauce on his little rice ball, and then Luffy grabs this rice ball, eats it, and his mouth lights on fire. A very good prank from Usopp, let's be honest. But it didn't last for long, because a couple arcs later, Luffy got his revenge. And this leads us to number 15, and it happened in episode 154. The classic metal watermelon. The Straw Hats arrive to Skypiea, and you know Luffy's checking out all the scenery and tries to eat this big bluish greenish watermelon. Turns out it's hard as metal and he loses a couple teeth, so then he decides to get his revenge on Usopp.
Hey, Usopp!
Yeah?
Got some fruit for ya!
With number 14, we're staying in Skypiea, and this is a moment with Zoro. And I really wanted to include it in this video because it's such an uncharacteristic-like moment for Zoro. He's fighting one of the Skypiea Guardians, and he's talking about his goggles to him, and then the Skypiea Guardian says, well, no, that's not true. And Zoro turns like towards the camera and says, he found me out?
You might as well give up. Those just look like regular goggles. He found me out!
I found this really interesting because One Piece does not do stuff like this often. You would see something like this in The Office where the characters turn and look at the camera and say something. One Piece doesn't do it very often in general, and let alone Zoro doing it is pretty odd. Okay, number 13. Do you remember when Luffy beat up an old guy for making fun of him? Because in Alabasta, it happened. Luffy accidentally uses this guy's rain powder, and of course he wasn't happy about it, so he tried to attack Luffy and then got beat up because of it, because Luffy's stronger than him, of course. And after Luffy beat him up, it seems like they kind of become friends. They had a nice chat, but then the old guy tries to crack a joke about Luffy, and it's one of the first times we see Luffy self-aware of the joke, and he decides to punch the guy again. Next up, we have the Going Merry disguised as a marine ship. Remember when they did that? Because it was in the G8 filler arc. In order to keep the Going Merry safe, they had to disguise it somehow, and covering it with paper drawn to look like a marine ship apparently worked. To be honest with you, this might be one of Usopp's best feats. Number 11 is a pretty funny moment between Luffy and Zoro. This was around the same time a lot of moments in this video has been. This was on the way to Drum Kingdom. Luffy couldn't handle the fact that Nami wasn't feeling well because if you don't remember, she got extremely sick after Little Garden and was close to dying, and Luffy was obsessed with the fact of trying to get her to laugh because he thought that would make her feel better. So he thought it would be a good idea to draw on his face and just make weird faces to try and get her to laugh, and instead of getting Nami to laugh because she was asleep, Zoro walks up behind Luffy, and then Luffy turns around and scares Zoro so bad he falls down. This moment was absolutely hilarious but also forgettable. Before we enter the top 10, I do want to say you can now join the Yonko Pirates, which is my pirate crew. If you didn't know, you can join by becoming a channel member. Members of the channel will get access to exclusive videos and community posts where I'll try to answer as many comments as possible. So I just figured I'd let you know because it's a great way to support me to continue making videos for you guys, and I'd love to have you join my pirate crew. So everybody's welcome. Okay, number 10 is when Sanji's cigarette was a lollipop. Now you might be thinking, huh? But this is an actual thing in One Piece. Well, not the original One Piece. In the One Piece 4 Kids dub that they made with a bunch of censorship to try and make it good for kids to watch, Sanji's cigarettes were changed to lollipops. Honestly, I might make a whole video about the 4 Kids dub in the future, but this is something I wanted to include here. It's just so random, and seeing Sanji hold a lollipop instead of his classic cigarette is pretty weird. And I feel like a lot of new One Piece fans don't even know about the 4 Kids dub. Honestly, if you haven't noticed, a lot of these moments are from like the first 200 episodes because there were so many random things that happened that you can really forget about because of the bigger stuff that's happening. And that's where number 9 comes into play. It's a filler episode focused on Nami and her dream of becoming the best navigator, and it's just the Straw Hats chilling on the Going Merry in the middle of the ocean. But a random salesperson shows up out of the ocean in a submarine type of thing that looks eerily similar to the Pokemon Omastar. If you remember this episode, you remember this guy just trying to sell the Straw Hats all sorts of random knickknacks that he had inside of this submarine, and I included it in this video because it was just very random and forgettable. Next up at number 8, we have a moment of Luffy in Amazon Lily. Now this is post Marineford after everything that happened there, and Luffy's kind of grieving over Ace and going through his tantrum. Jinbei is there to help Luffy get through this and kind of console him, but Luffy, being in his delirious state, bites Jinbei. I don't know if he thought Jinbei was a piece of meat in his little tantrum, but he bit him and had a solid grip on him. Sticking with the teeth theme, number 7 also involves Luffy and teeth. Why are there so many random things about Luffy and teeth? So at Arlong Park, in the midst of the battle with Arlong, Luffy manages to knock Arlong's teeth out of his mouth, and he does what any normal person would do. He picks up these teeth and sticks them into his own mouth like a pair of dentures. Yeah, that's pretty normal, right? I swear, Luffy was so unhinged pre-time skip, we don't see him do stuff like this very often anymore, but this moment was hilarious. Number 6, we have a Frankie moment in Thriller Bark. Typically, when you think of Frankie and Thriller Bark, you either remember him building a staircase like his 2017 Fortnite, or him trying to make the ultimate weapon and combine the Straw Hat's powers, which ended up failing because Robin didn't want to do it. However, what you forgot about is how he built this bridge in 2.3 seconds flat, showing off his beautiful craftsmanship at the same time. I'd like to see Frankie do more random stuff like this. It's just a tiny moment, but it can add so much to an arc. At number 5, we have Luffy and Usopp, who are doing what most people do when in the middle of the ocean, fishing. Luffy decides to catch a great big giant shark, and him and Usopp thought it would be a great idea to toss this in the aquarium on the Thousand Sunny. However, they forgot that this shark was actually a predator and ate every other fish inside of the aquarium, so I assume they had to get rid of their new pet. Alright, we got another moment in Alabasta because Alabasta is full of them. Number 4 is when Zoro is the first person in the show to read a poneglyph. A crazy sentence, but it's true. In a random filler episode as the Straw Hats are traveling through the desert of Alabasta, Zoro, Chopper, and Luffy fall through a hole and find some ruins. And within these ruins is actually a poneglyph. I do think it was stated somewhere that the makers of this filler episode had no idea how important the poneglyphs would be in the future, so you can kind of think of this as a mistake in One Piece. But hey, Zoro was reading that thing. Continuing on in the deserts of Alabasta, number 3 is when Luffy was high on drugs. Now, if you watch my channel, you do remember this because I made a short about it maybe a month ago, but Luffy was just dying of thirst in Alabasta, so he decided to drink the water out of a cactus. Lo and behold, this cactus was some sort of drug and made Luffy hallucinate. And he went bananas. He was running all over the place, jumping on people, breaking stuff, biting through stuff. It was just a crazy moment to see. If you've remembered all these moments so far, you got a big brain, and I commend you for that. Now for number 2, we've got a moment in episode 226. The Straw Hats run across Foxy again in this episode, and Nami and Usopp end up lost throughout his ship and find this weird little hallway. And inside of it, there are pirates locked up who clearly hadn't seen the light of day for weeks, if not months. And this chamber was full of pedophiles because they started catcalling Nami, talking about how they hadn't seen a woman in however long. But that's not even the moment you forgot about. You probably remember that. But then Nami and Usopp decide it's a good idea to run across this area where these guys are at, and they grab Usopp and start groping him thinking it's Nami. An absolute crazy thing, but I found this hilarious. Lastly, we have the episode between Skypiea and G8 when the Straw Hats are falling down from the sky. If you don't remember, the balloon octopus thing like basically deflates and they just start falling through the sky. When this happens, Usopp falls off of the boat and Luffy saves him by sticking his arm out and grabbing Usopp's nose. This is like a 2-second clip, so if you remember Luffy grabbing Usopp's nose to save him, you are an absolute G, because I don't know how you remember that. Let me know if you remembered all 25 moments from this video, and also drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. This was something different, but I really enjoyed making it, and if you drop a like, it shows me that I should make some more. So, see ya.